Hey, welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I am Steve Smith. It is a beautiful Sunday morning, late morning. Just finished my breakfast and 2 cups of coffee, and now on my third, and relaxing. And you can't get much better day than this. Uh, and as a juxtaposition to this, I want to talk about the cities exploding. What's going to happen? What we should expect. First, I want to put in a word here and welcome all the new people every day when I get up and I see the new people have subscribed, and that's very nice, and so many over there on Patreon too. For those of you who are over on Patreon, just put up another one on the principles and elements of giving more power to your strikes. We're kind of concentrated on punches in this one. Actually, hand strikes, because punches are only one type of hand strike, but we go through a little bit with Hallie and talk about how to put more power in those punches, and that's part of our martial skills. So anybody who has interest in that and some other things that we do over there, the link is down below. Please join us on Patreon. Love to have you, and love to hear your comments. Get a lot of great comments over there. So anyway, and I should say also a special welcome to all the stone modders out there. If you're a stone modder, you know who I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a group of people who have read my books, and since the very beginning, the first one that came out, the reversion, I started getting reading reviews on Amazon and getting emails and getting comments on here from people saying that after having read it, they would rather live at Stonemont than in the world as it is today, where they are. And as each successive book came out after that, I got more of those comments, and I have a tendency to agree with you. So for all you stone modders, and anybody who's not out there, hey, welcome. Come into the stone knot world. I think you'll like it. If you read the books, you might you probably get something out of them. And the sales of the new book, and thank you all very much. And for everybody who, I know there's a lot of people who read my books that don't watch the YouTube here, but for any of you who are new to here that have read the books, welcome. I know I have a fairly large readership, across, well, not the whole world, quite a few in Europe and Australia and Canada and all that, and so it's nice to have you all here. What's going to happen when the cities explode? Well, some will say that the cities are already exploding a little bit. They haven't gotten to the full point yet, and I have a different opinion on these things than a lot of people do, and I want to share that today. That's the main reason for me making this, and to give you an idea of why I think the things I do. I'll give you just a thumbnail of my background so that it'll help you understand. I was born in the city. Moved out fairly soon. My parents saw what was disintegrating in Kansas City, Missouri, which is the big Kansas City. They saw what was happening with the schools. They saw what was happening with the socioeconomic situation, and they knew that there was a better place right across the state line in Kansas. And so we moved over to Kansas, and I grew up not in the affluent suburbs, but in the working class suburbs, right across the state line from Missouri in Kansas. Went to the good schools, though, and from there, after families did after World War II, they worked hard and they saved their money and they bettered themselves a little bit. Then we moved to a nicer area, and I grew up in a very nice suburban atmosphere. Went back over to the city on the Missouri side when I turned 21 and wanted to be a cop, and was a cop over there for quite a while. Worked in the inner city areas, both in uniform for a number of years and then undercover. I know the city intimately. I know the people in it. I know the different kinds of people in it. I know the politics of it, and so that gives me an understanding for what I'm going to say about both the city and the suburbs. And if you haven't lived in either one of those, I think it would be difficult to fully understand, just like anybody who hasn't lived in a small town or grew up in a small town or grew up in the country would not have a good understanding of that as someone who has. So I want to share some of that. What we've been seeing here over the last couple of months as these protests started and then turned into riots, and all of the joined by all of the little useful idiots, which actually they're useless idiots. They're a bunch of pampered, self-absorbed, entitled little minions, wanting to find something exciting to do as opposed to study and work and better themselves. They're pouring out their little social justice warriors, and they're being used by these larger groups who are intent on a Marxist insurrection. Okay, a couple of these groups, I'm not even going to mention the names on it. We all know who they are. They're used as cover for this other larger plan. And because we have raised such a weak and undereducated, though over-indoctrinated population, and specifically the younger generation, they're easily used by these people, just like they have been in every Marxist insurrection and revolution, to think that they're fighting for social justice and take it to the man and all this. So these groups, who, if it was only the hardcore true believers, would be very small, have been inflated by these idiots that they put on the front lines to make themselves, a couple of reasons, to make themselves look larger than they really are, but also to absorb the retaliation of the authorities. Okay, when we have watched these cities being taken over, essentially whole sections of the cities being taken over by these people, and there's been a refusal on the part of the political class to respond and just simply take care of it, that shows the disintegration, the devolution, the collapse of the cities. Now, what's the reason behind this? There are reasons, in my opinion, behind this, and I know these people pretty well. The cities are full of government workers and government non-workers. And what I mean by government workers, of course, is when they show up at an office. Most of them don't do that much work and get a paycheck. The government non-workers are, of course, the people who don't work and still get a government check. So all of these people have a vested interest in an increase in the size of the government, of the central government, right? So what we saw was these the local police departments being told to stand down, and of course the problems exploded from there, to the point to where now federal troops are being sent in. Okay, federal agents, I guess I shouldn't say troops, but that's what they are. Federal agents are being sent into some of these big cities. Seattle, Portland, I guess they're going into Chicago, other places, I don't know where all. We had a bunch come into Kansas City. A bunch came into Kansas City because, and it's called Operation Legend. It was named after a young boy, 4 years old, I think, named Legend, who was killed as a result of street violence. I forget whether it was a drive-by and killed by these many idiots who drive around with nothing better to do and no education and a gun in their hand. But he was killed. And so, of course, when something like this happens, if the right people think it's going to serve the right political cause, they make an issue of it. Happens all the time. Happens in every city around, but occasionally they want to they'll grab onto something and make it the issue of the day if it serves their purpose and kind of goes together with other things they've got going on. So we got these federal cops they're not cops, they're federal agents in Kansas City. I think they sent a couple of hundred after they'd been here for a while, they had a press conference announcing very proudly that they had recovered a stolen car. And then just a couple of days ago, they had another press conference that said that they had arrested somebody who was a felon in possession of a firearm. These are federal agents. Okay. First off, federal agents have a lot of money to use. They have a lot of resources. They aren't people who wanted to be street cops. They're people who wanted to be a part of the large system. It's a different mindset. I'm not putting them down. There's a place for what they do. Most street cops would go nuts if they had to work with them, because a street cop is a guy who wants to be out there in the action all the time, wants to mix it up, take care of his district, assume responsibility, and to be honest, it kind of likes the shall I say, excitement. Um, but the federal people are not like that. They prefer to work in did I finish my thought? Most street cops would go nuts if they were contained within the federal system and had to work in an office and do everything. It would just drive you nuts. So federal troops, federal agents are not well equipped for enforcing the law on the streets, and actually they're not. A federal agent cannot, by law, unless they've changed things when I was on with some federal decree, which is always a possibility. That federal people cannot enforce state laws. Okay, it's kind of when you start at the bottom. City cop can enforce the city ordinances and everything above. Okay, county officers can enforce county ordinances and everything above. State officers can enforce state law, which includes misdemeanors and felonies, and that. But you are not commissioned to enforce laws beneath your level of commissioning, if that makes any sense. I don't know if that's interesting to any of you at all, and I assume it's the same as when I was on. So if it's not, somebody correct me on that. That'll be fine. I won't take offense, and it will be illustrative for all of us. So you've seen what's happened in these towns. That the feds have gone in there. The people have surrounded these courthouses and set fire to them, and in some cases boarded the agents inside the courthouse, not letting them out. Now, what kind of enforcement is that? Okay, we have put law enforcement in positions, from the ones who were kneeling at the beginning to those who were standing down to now they won't come out of the courthouse. Okay, and then they finally did and made a few arrests. There have been a couple of cases where I think they did things that, and these weren't feds, these were local cops. I forget if they were city or state or what. They did something unfortunate, and I saw where they had a line of the cops with their shields facing off against a group of people, demonstrators, and all of a sudden the line of cops separated, and out come the dogs, right? The dogs come, and the dog handlers come spilling out from the middle of that open gap and going after and backing up. And they backed those protesters down the street a good bit before they closed ranks again, and they got accomplished what they wanted to. I mean, it was tactically, it was a very good operation. Optically, probably got some problems there. Anybody that remembers Bull Connor immediately remembered the pictures of the police dogs, right? Probably not the best thing to do. Anyway, back to the feds. What are they really doing here? They're not going to solve these problems. They're not equipped to solve these problems. And many of the local cops, if they're not being told to stand down, they're quitting, as I predicted that they would. No, what good cop would want to stay in a situation like that where they're not backed up? Okay. So what's the purpose? What's really going to happen? Well, I'll tell you what the feds are doing. Since they're not taking care of these problems, and I love how everybody, when they hear, oh, the federal troops are coming, they're going to take care of it. They're not going to take care of squat. Just like sending the National Guard. Military are not equipped and not mentally focused and not trained for urban. Maybe they're trained for urban warfare. If you're going through, a village and clearing house after house after, that's one thing. Dealing in a big city is totally different. Uh, but what they're doing is they are identifying everybody in those crowds. And this was going to be, I was going to put this on over at Patreon. One of these days, a lesson from the IRA. But they are identifying everybody in those crowds. They're identifying the leaders. They are identifying the second tier of the leaders. You know, when one leader, occasionally they'll go out and they'll grab one, and they'll take him off scene. And what they want to do is see who replaces them. And then they will compare, and they'll say, okay, these people were at this demonstration, and those people were at that demonstration. And these morons over here are all a bunch of useless college students who think that they're making a difference. And we've got their pictures, and we know their families, and this person is, their parents are, one's a federal judge, and another one's a politician, and you know, we saw them with a little, you know, somebody handed them a Coke bottle. Do they still have Coke bottles? Some bottle with some gasoline in it, and they threw it. Okay, well, that's a federal offense because they threw it, you know, at the federal courthouse. So we can go to them someday and say, hey, you want to go inside for 20 years, you softy? Or would you like to be an informant for us? Would you like to provide us with information? And then to send them right back into these. Now, the purpose of this is not to solve the problem. The purpose, because those organisms, as big as the federal government, is all about information. Okay. When was the last time you saw a problem solved? A federal focus on a problem, solve it. Okay. Did the war on poverty win the war on poverty? I saw some poverty just the other day. How about you? It exacerbated. It increased it. Did the war on drugs solve that problem? No, it's bigger than ever. Okay? These things are jobs programs for government workers. Some jobs programs for cops, some jobs programs for bureaucrats, some for politicians, whatever. They are going to take this situation and ride these major cities right down into the ditch, into where all of the good people are going to leave. All of the tax base is going to leave. And because who wants to have their business, you know, a law firm that's downtown Kansas City, hey, they can build a building out here. And I'll tell you why it's better out here in just a minute and the differences. And they're going to lose their tax base. But they want that. They want that. Because their constituents, see, are undereducated, will keep voting them in, and then they will keep promising government money until each one of these cities is like another Detroit or Baltimore, and essentially a federally funded proposition. Meaning that the government, everything in there, and most of the people are supported with federal government money. Not local tax base, because there won't be any left, but federal government money. And because that's what these people are tuned into, that's what they want. Now, I almost made this one a couple of days ago. I'm glad I didn't, because I was going to use an example that hadn't happened yet. I was going to tell you what would happen when this stuff gets to the suburbs. But a lot of people wouldn't have believed me, because there's this idea that when these cities explode, the suburbs are next, right? And we've even heard these people talk about, we're coming out there. When we're done burning this down, we're coming for you on your streets. Well, you know, a couple of carloads might come out here, but they're going to be surprised at what happens. And the first of is when they come out here, and a group did. I'll tell you what happened. A group came out here a couple of nights ago to have a big parade. Excuse me just a second. We got a crotch rocket running down there. Young guy that likes to hear the sound of his pipes. I did too when I was his age. They came out here, about 300 of them, and they expected to come out here to the softies in the suburbs, right? They were gonna bring it to us. You know what happened? Because what happened when they were down there raising Cain down in the city, nobody did anything, right? Nobody went and stopped them. Nobody threw them in jail. The cops all backed up, took a knee, hid in the building, whatever they did. Not because they're cowards, but because they were told to by their uppers. And after you get about above a sergeant, most of them are politicians. And then the politicians above them, and they still need their paycheck for a while until they figure out what they're going to do next. So these guys aren't cowards, but they've been told to stand down, and so they're going to. They got kids to feed. Well, that's what these people were used to, and they said, "Boy, if the city, if we can run the city like that, those soft idiots out there in suburbia who nobody has any respect for because they think we're all stupid, all that." It's going to be a piece of cake, and we're just going to turn them around. Well, guess what happened? A bunch of them got thrown in jail. Our police went and stopped them. And they said, toss them in the caboose. Why did that happen? Because here, where I live, and surrounding suburbs most of the place, government workers, government representatives, police departments, whatever, respond to their constituents. It's just like what's happened down there. Well, the constituency here in the suburbs is much different than the constituency down in the city. We are people who have worked hard. We have achieved what we've achieved. We're not about to let a bunch of morons come out here and cause us a bunch of trouble, or any trouble, to be honest. And our police forces out here, now they might not be the same as a city cop mentally. Okay, there's nothing like a city cop mentally, but they are well trained within today's parameters. They are extremely well funded. They are extremely well equipped, and they are extremely well paid, as are their sergeants, captains, majors, and chiefs. And they don't want to lose this gig. As a result, and nor do our councilmen. Okay, and they know that we will call them and talk to them and express our displeasure and talk about voting them out if we don't like what they're doing. And so they have a tendency to listen. And so they're not going to let this golden goose get fried. So when they know we don't want the trouble out here, so when some trouble comes knocking, guess what happens? That trouble gets taken care of. Now, a lot of people say, oh, the suburbs, that's a horrible place to be. No, it's really not. And that's one of the reasons, and I'm going to do another, because I've had a couple of good questions. I had somebody ask me why I still live in the suburbs. Good question. I'm going to make a video on that when I get around to it. Another guy, what's my tripwire for going to my bug out location? That's another good question. I have, there's a layered system there, and when I get a chance, I'll address that. But when they come, I'll give you an example out here too. We live close to a busy street, as those of you who watch can hear. There's a reason that I live in this particular house in this particular neighborhood, and I will get to that here one of these days, and I think you'll understand. We had a problem with about every night police cars that go blasting down this street with their sirens on. And it would wake me up, it would wake the kids up, my dog would get to howling, I'd be tired the next day, the kids would go to school tired, and finally I just had it, and so I emailed the chief of police, and I explained to him, I said, I used to be on. We had to stop people, we had to go places late at night, but we didn't put on our sirens, we put on our lights, and we didn't, especially during past a residential neighborhood. Is there anything you can do about this? Because my kids are going to school tired about, all this. Well, the very next day I get a call from a major who says, the chief read your email, has assigned me to follow up and see what we can do about this. Now, what do you think would happen if that happened in the city? They'd say, well, I won't use bad language on here. They'll say, well, take a hike, right? We don't care. Well, out here, this major calls, we talk for a long time. We discuss what might be, what he looked up exactly what the deal was on that particular siren that night. He told me what they were going and all this. And you know what? That has been 6 months ago. And it happened every night. Do you know how many times it's happened since I had the conversation with the major? Once. Okay. That's the thing. This is good out here because of the response of all our civil servants to our wishes. Okay. And we put a lot into our lifestyles out here, and we don't want it jacked with. And if we need to hire more cops, we will. And if we need to give them more equipment, we will. You know. Now I know, if you're out in the country, you're out in a small town, and you're in a situation that say, well, I'm just in a situation where I take care of that stuff myself. I understand. And I'm not averse to taking care of stuff myself if I have to. I also know that what comes next is a bunch of legal battles and financial expense to that. Okay, so when I can call my friendly police department, they show up in a minute with a big smile and say, "Mr. Smith, what can we do for you?" I like it. And also that in the smaller areas, and I have nothing against it. I'm just juxtaposing this here. See, if you're in a county with that's got 8 deputies, and one of them's on at a time, and if you have a major problem, you have a major problem that probably one deputy and the 3 that he can wake up might not be able to handle before it's too late. So these are just things that I'm talking about. That I kind of got offline there. But when the cities explode, and I'm going to make another one about when the cities implode, because that's the other scenario that everybody in the preparedness and survival world has always worried about, the golden hordes coming out of the cities. Okay, when everything goes down, EMP. This is what I wrote my books about. And when I wrote the first one, the reversion, I still kind of subscribe to that point of view because I hadn't thought it out. I just, somebody comes up with an idea, people read it, they repeat it, it becomes the common opinion, and then it becomes a truism, which people think is true because it's been repeated enough. And everybody was afraid, you got to get out of the suburbs, you got to get out in the country, because those golden hordes are just going to eat you up. When they get done down there, they're coming for you. When I first started writing the series, I didn't give it much thought, and then I got to thinking about it. By the time I wrote the third one, the renewal, I realized I think something very, very different than that would happen. I won't get into that in this one. I'll get into that pretty soon in another one. But I tell you, these people down in the cities, if they think, you folks in the country and small towns, you'll never have to worry about this stuff until you drive down there. Unless you drive down there. Because they'll never make it through the suburbs. Let me tell you what the suburbs is full of. Smart people. Okay. People might think that we're all a bunch of clueless, entitled, soft folks. Well, there's a few of us. Most of us aren't. Okay. In my little area here, I live in a small little double cul-de-sac of 23 houses. Now, I think I've got 4 doctors in here, a bunch of lawyers, some engineers, some other types, professional people that people would tend to think of as marks, right? Not predators. You would be surprised. The guy across from me is a lawyer, but he's also a former Marine. Okay? And his wife does jiu-jitsu for fun, and it's probably tougher than he is. Folks down on the other block, you would be surprised. I made one a long time ago about where are all the preppers. They are all around you. You would be amazed at how many of the people out here are serious preppers. You would be amazed. I got a friend of mine who lives not far from here. His gun room would make you think you're at Cabela's, and he knows how to use it. Okay. He's a big financial guy now, but he was Army, and he loves weaponry, and he's got enough to outfit the town, probably, if necessary. But they are all over here. The people don't live out here because they're stupid, or because they're weak, or because they're afraid. People in the suburbs, for the most part, are fairly comfortable with conflict, and have had to deal and overcome conflict to have the lifestyle they do. So, if anything tries to come out of the city, don't worry, it will not get through the suburbs. Because if our police don't take care of it, if they can't take care of it, we've got other police that can come in and help take care of it, and then the people themselves will take care of it. Because we're not putting up with that junk. So anyway, you are going to see these cities are going to explode. They are going to turn into little federal centers of support, nanny states, and it's by design. And then that's going to set up for what comes next. And I think I'll save that for another video, because what comes next is going to be very interesting, I think. So, with that, we'll continue to watch what happens down there. It's going to keep on going. And it's going to keep on going right up to the election. And if Trump wins, it's going to keep going. If the other side wins, it's going to stop. But the threats against us will be different and renewed, and we know what those are. So, interesting times. Watch what happens in the cities. Stay out of them if you can. Prepare for if they try to come after you, then just take care of it. Because this stuff will not last. It's kind of like, I tell you what it's like. It's like an active shooter. Active shooter situations almost always end at the first contact with resistance, with true resistance, wherever that resistance comes from. And very often it's not the police. So keep that in mind. You all have a good day. Prepare for what's coming next, for whatever it might be. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.